Not a single thing in this house belongs to you. You were nothing but the help, and now you're fired. Get out!" That's what my husband yelled after court, leaving me homeless and penniless. I sat on a bench and broke into tears. An old man in tattered clothes shivered beside me. I felt sorry for him and gave him my last scarf. He suddenly straightened and said, "I never forget kindness, child. Come, I'll show you your new home." My husband drove by, saw us, and nearly crashed. Hello, everyone. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Enjoy the story. But to understand how my life collapsed and began again, we need to go back 5 minutes to the courthouse parking lot. The winter wind swept across the parking lot of the Cedar Falls County Courthouse, sharp and metallic, needling the skin through even the thickest coat. But Vanessa Brooks barely felt anything. She stood at the base of the courthouse steps, staring at nothing, trying to steady herself after the gavel that had just fractured her life. The judge's voice still echoed in her mind, calm and distant, as if reciting the terms of someone else's fate. The prenuptial agreement she had signed long ago out of blind devotion had been upheld in full. She walked out with no share of the company she had helped build from their cramped kitchen, no home in Ridgeview Heights, no car, no savings, and not even the slightest acknowledgement of the years she had poured into Eric's world while neglecting her own. The cold air felt strangely muffled, as though the town itself were holding its breath, watching her unravel. Eric Jacobs did not wait for her to process a single thought. He moved with the brisk arrogance of a man who believed the universe owed him an apology simply for existing. Without a word, he yanked open the trunk of his glossy black Escalade, grabbed Vanessa's single duffel bag, the only item she was permitted to take, and hurled it into a muddy, half-frozen puddle. A splatter of brown water stained her coat, but he did not look back to see it. He slammed the trunk shut, wiped his hands as if ridding himself of dirt, and glared at her with the triumphant cruelty of someone who believed humiliation was a form of justice. The passenger window slid down just enough for Madison Lane to peek out, flicking a perfectly curled strand of platinum hair over her shoulder. Wrapped in a snow-white designer coat worth more than everything Vanessa owned combined, she gave a bright, musical laugh that cut sharper than the wind. "Eric, let's go," she drawled. "It smells like poverty out here, and we are going to be late for dinner." Her glossy lips wrapped around every word with theatrical disdain. Eric smirked, slid behind the wheel, and revved the engine with a petty flourish. The Escalade swung around, showering Vanessa with ice chips from the tires as it shot toward the exit. The vehicle disappeared down the street, leaving behind the bitter fumes of exhaust and an ache so deep it hollowed the air around her. For a long moment she stood in the empty whiteness of the lot, motionless, her breath forming ghostly clouds that drifted away as quickly as her old life. Eventually, her body remembered how to move. She picked up her soaked duffel, hugged it to her chest, and walked toward the nearest bus stop even though she had no fare, no destination, and no idea what came next. She lowered herself onto the icy bench, curling inward, trying to contain the trembling that no longer came from the cold alone. She pressed her gloved fingers against her eyes, and tears slipped through anyway, scalding her cheeks before freezing against the winter air. A rasping cough startled her. She lifted her gaze and saw an old man hunched at the far end of the bench. He wore layers of threadbare clothing that looked as if they had absorbed many winters and too few warm nights. His hands shook violently as he tried to pull a frayed collar closer to his neck. He did not ask for money. He did not even look her way. He simply tried to survive another hour in a world that had stopped offering him kindness long ago. Vanessa stared at her own warm scarf, soft and heavy around her neck. It was the last expensive thing she owned, a genuine alpaca wrap her mother had given her years ago. Memories flickered, her mother's hands tying it, her voice telling Vanessa to stay warm, to take care of herself even when life felt cold. Without overthinking, Vanessa unwound the scarf, moved closer to the old man, and gently draped it around his shoulders. "Here," she whispered, adjusting it the way she once adjusted Eric's scarf before he left for work. "Wrap it tight." The man stiffened at her touch, then slowly raised his head. His eyes were startlingly clear, light gray and sharp, incongruous with his frail exterior. Vanessa unscrewed the lid of her small thermos and offered it to him. "It's herbal tea," she said softly. thyme and mint, still warm. He accepted it with shaking hands. Steam drifted upward as he drank, and with each sip his trembling eased. When the thermos was empty, he straightened his spine, and something shifted inside him, something commanding, controlled, nothing like the broken figure he had appeared to be. He handed her the thermos, looked directly into her eyes, and spoke with a calm certainty that startled her. "I repay kindness," he said. "Stand up, daughter. Let me take you home." Vanessa blinked, confused, as if she had misheard him. "Home?" He rose with surprising steadiness. "I will show you your new one." And for reasons she could not explain, she followed. The old man moved with a purpose that did not belong на человеку, который дрожал от холода минуту назад. He stepped off the curb, and Vanessa hesitated only long enough to glance back at the courthouse, its stone facade looming over the parking lot like a monument to all the choices she wished she could unmake. There was nothing left for her there. No appeal, no second chance, no forgotten clause the judge might suddenly remember, only echoes and signed papers. She tightened her grip on the wet duffel and followed him across the street. They walked in silence, their breaths mingling with the pale winter air. The snow along the sidewalks of Cedar Falls had been plowed into uneven ridges, gray at the edges where tire slush had bled into the white. The old man did not shuffle like someone beaten down by life. His stride grew steadier with every step, as if the borrowed warmth in his bones had awakened something long dormant. Vanessa watched him from slightly behind, trying to guess who he might be. A veteran fallen on hard times, a retired worker whose pension had vanished into some crooked fund. The town was full of stories like that. She had never imagined she would become one of them. They turned the corner, and her stomach clenched. Right ahead, on the opposite side of the street, rose the gated community where she had once driven home with grocery bags and birthday cakes. Ridgeview Heights sprawled across a gentle hill, the houses arranged like glossy magazine spreads, all pillars and glass, manicured lawns, and identical stone mailboxes. Eric's house stood near the top, an oversized monument to his ego with a wide driveway and a pair of fake stone lions flanking the front steps. Even from here, she recognized the silhouette of the roof, the way the exterior lights carved geometric shadows into the snow. The old man did not lead her toward Ridgeview Heights. Instead, he veered toward the other side of the road, where a massive property brooded behind a tall wrought iron fence. Vanessa had driven past it many times but had never seen the gates open. Locals called it the Grant Estate, in a tone that blended gossip with superstition. An old stone mansion from another century, its windows dark, its grounds overgrown, its ironwork filmed with rust. Some said the last owner had died abroad and the heirs had abandoned the place, too busy fighting over money to care about a crumbling landmark in a small Colorado town. The man stopped in front of the main gate, resting his hand on the frozen metal. At that very moment, the low growl of an engine rose behind them. Vanessa did not have to turn to know which car it was. The Escalade rolled down the hill from Ridgeview Heights, headlights slicing through the thin fog, its tires whispering over the wet asphalt. Eric had apparently decided to take the long way around, savoring one more pass by the courthouse so he could replay his victory in his mind. When he spotted Vanessa standing by the gate of the abandoned estate with a ragged old man, the Escalade slowed. Eric lowered his window, his smirk already forming, the cruel remark surely building on his tongue. Before he could spit it out, the old man removed a ragged glove, revealing a steady hand, and brushed aside a thin crust of snow that had settled over a small metal panel set into the brick column. It was a keypad, the numbers faintly visible under years of grime. Without hesitating, he punched in a code, a long sequence that he entered with fluency rather than guesswork. The panel beeped, a small green light flared to life, and the heavy wrought iron gate, which locals assumed had rusted shut long ago, shuddered and began to swing inward with a deep, well-oiled hum. The expression on Eric's face crumpled. His eyes widened, his mouth falling open as if someone had yanked away his lines mere seconds before his cue. He was so distracted watching the supposedly abandoned gate glide open that he rolled his Escalade too far forward and bumped the front wheel hard against the curb, kissing a nearby streetlight pole with the bumper in a dull, humiliating thud. Madison's shrill voice burst from inside the car, a little wail of anger and disbelief, but the old man did not even glance in their direction. He stepped forward, made a small, courtly gesture toward the opening, and looked back at Vanessa. "After you," he said. Vanessa hesitated on the threshold, feeling Eric's stunned gaze burning between her shoulder blades. For years she had walked up the driveway of the house he built, arms heavy with groceries and baking supplies, telling herself that someday all the sacrifices would pay off. Now she stepped instead onto the long, snow-dusted path of the unknown estate, her boots crunching on gravel that had not felt regular footsteps for many seasons. The gate creaked behind them, closing with deliberate slowness, as if the property itself were swallowing them and sealing out the world she had just lost. Up close, the mansion was even more imposing. Weathered stone rose toward a high roofline, intricate wooden trim framed tall windows that had been boarded up in places, and a grand front porch stretched across the width of the house, its railings draped in icicles. Yet beneath the dust and neglect there was a symmetry, a dignity that no amount of time could erase. Vanessa felt small in front of it, a damp duffel at her side, her life reduced to fabric and fear. The old man climbed the front steps with the ease of someone who had done so countless times. He pulled another set of keys from the depths of his tattered coat, found the right one by touch alone, and slid it into the heavy lock on the oak front door. The mechanism turned cleanly without a hint of rust. When he pushed, the door opened at once, no groan of swollen wood, no resistance. Warm air, faint but present, brushed her cheeks. He stepped aside. "Welcome to my home," he said, "and if you wish, to yours." Vanessa stared at him. "Your home?" she echoed. "But everyone says this place is abandoned, that the owner died somewhere in Europe and the estate is stuck in probate, that it belongs to some corporation, or the bank, or no one." A shadow of amusement touched the old man's mouth. "Everyone likes stories more than facts," he replied. "My name is Michael Grant. This estate, this land, every inch of it is mine. People assumed I vanished. I did not see the need to correct them." He stepped into the foyer and flicked a switch on the wall with casual familiarity. Somewhere high above, an antique chandelier blinked, sputtered, then flooded the space with a warm golden light that spread along the marble floor and over furniture draped in white sheets. Dust floated in the air like fine snow, touched by the glow. Vanessa edged inside, her boots leaving damp prints on the stone. The house smelled of closed spaces and old wood, of forgotten books and trapped winter. Yet it was not the sour scent of abandonment. There was a hum in the walls, the low murmur of a generator or a hidden furnace. This place was asleep, not dead. Michael closed the door behind them. He removed the filthy cap from his head, and beneath it his hair was neatly trimmed in silver, not the wild, matted mess she had expected. Without the layers of hunched posture and visible misery, he looked less like a homeless stranger and more like a man who had once commanded boardrooms and crews. "Eric thinks he owns the hill," Michael said calmly, as if continuing a conversation she had not realized they had begun. "He thinks that oversized box across the street makes him a king, but that box stands on ground he does not own anymore." Vanessa blinked, trying to keep up. "The bank," she guessed. "The mortgage, the construction loans. You bought his debt." A slow, satisfied smile curved Michael's lips. He mortgaged the land and the house to chase bigger contracts. Then the market cooled, and he kept pretending it would fix itself. Payments slipped. Favors were called in. He assumed he had more time, that his friends in the county offices would shield him forever. Banks do not care about friendships, and I have never been patient with men who build empires on lies. Vanessa hugged her arms around herself, a shiver rolling through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "So this whole time," she murmured, "while he strutted around that house like he was untouchable, it was already on someone else's ledger." "It has been mine for weeks," Michael said. "Quietly, legally. He lives in my house now, though he does not know it. Yet." He studied her face, his gaze shrewd and oddly gentle at once. "You spent years feeding his ambition, baking through the night, managing accounts, building a reputation on which he now walks like a red carpet. I have watched that hill for a long time, Miss Brooks. You are not the only one he stole from." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, fighting the tightness in her throat. "What do you want from me?" she finally asked. "Why bring me here?" Michael nodded toward the depths of the house, where darkened doorways hinted at rooms waiting to wake. "This estate needs a steward," he said simply, "a working heart, someone who understands kitchens and people, who can bring life back to these halls and do it with pride, not greed. I do not need a maid. I need a manager, a partner in order, someone to make this house breathe again. In return, you will have a roof, a salary, security, and the time and tools to build your own name instead of someone else's." His words settled over her like a heavy, fragile blanket. A day ago, she had been a wife in a big house, clinging to the illusion of safety. An hour ago, she had been nobody on a frozen bench, stripped of everything. Now a stranger in a borrowed scarf was offering her keys to a life she could not yet see clearly. Vanessa looked down at her hands, at the faint tremor in her fingers. Then she raised her head, meeting his gaze fully. "If I say yes," she asked quietly, "does that mean I am starting over? Or just hiding from the wreckage?" Michael's eyes softened, but his voice remained steady. "Sometimes," he said, "the only way to stop living in the ruins is to move into a house that still has a future." He extended his hand, not as a beggar this time, but as a man accustomed to sealing deals. "So, Miss Brooks, will you take the job?" Her heart hammered in her chest, but for the first time that day, the pounding felt less like panic and more like possibility. She slipped her hand into his. "Yes," Vanessa said, "I will." Michael's hand was warm and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos her life had become. Vanessa let his grip anchor her as she stepped deeper into the mansion's vast foyer. The chandelier above them hummed faintly, its crystals catching the light in soft amber reflections that danced across the dust sheets draped over antique furniture. The air carried a quiet dignity, like a slumbering theater waiting for the curtain to rise again. Vanessa felt small amid the high ceilings and marble floors, yet oddly safe, as though the house exhaled a long-forgotten warmth in her direction, welcoming her into its ribs rather than swallowing her whole. She stood still, listening to the low vibration of heat moving through hidden vents, surprised to realize the place was not nearly as abandoned as the town believed. Michael walked a few feet ahead, his posture straightening with every step, and for the first time she sensed the weight of the decades he must have spent here. This was not a man stumbling into luck. This was a man reclaiming something. He nodded toward a wide staircase framed by intricately carved railings. "Your room is upstairs," he said, his voice more businesslike now. "First door on the right. There is hot water, fresh linens, enough space to breathe." Vanessa lifted her gaze to the sweeping staircase, the polished banister gleaming in the chandelier light. The thought of having her own space again stirred something inside her, a flicker of relief mixed with disbelief, but also a protective hesitation. It felt too sudden, too generous. Michael did not push. He let her absorb the moment at her own pace. After a beat, he turned toward a hallway branching off to the left. "I will be in the study," he added, gesturing to a dark walnut door. "There is paperwork to review. Take your time." Vanessa tightened her grip on her damp duffel and climbed the steps slowly, letting her free hand glide along the railing, feeling the grooves worn into the wood by countless hands from another era. The upstairs landing opened into a corridor lined with tall windows, their dark panes reflecting her shadow as she walked. The first door on the right creaked softly when she pushed it open, revealing a modest but beautiful room. A high bed with fresh white sheets stood near the window. A wooden dresser bore the subtle scent of cedar. The ensuite bathroom shone with tiles polished to a gentle sheen, and when she turned the handle of the faucet, hot water gushed immediately. Vanessa's throat tightened. After the courthouse, after Eric's cruelty, after the freezing bench and the humiliation in front of Madison, the simple luxury of warmth felt almost holy. She showered slowly, letting the water peel away the courthouse chill from her skin, washing out the sting of bile that had risen in her throat on the sidewalk. When she emerged wrapped in a clean robe she found in the closet, her mind felt clearer, though still tender. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes from distance rather than neglect, a quiet with potential. She descended the stairs with her duffel now empty, her clothes folded in the dresser upstairs, her hair damp but warm. Something tugged at her memory, the scent of flour and sugar from years ago, the muscle memory of kneading dough through heartbreak and celebration alike. She had been many things, but she had always been a baker at heart. That truth glowed faintly inside her, even now, even here. Her feet carried her toward the back of the house, where she sensed a kitchen must be. When she pushed open the heavy swinging door, she stopped short. The kitchen was breathtaking. A sprawling space with copper pots hanging like suspended suns, marble counters stretching into elegant curves, and industrial-grade ovens that gleamed beneath layers of dust. The room was coated in silence and disuse, but beneath it all she could feel the heartbeat of possibility pulsing through the tiles. Vanessa moved slowly, trailing her fingertips across the counters, the refrigerator handle, the pantry door. She found flour sealed in heavy paper sacks, sugar in airtight jars, boxes of spices labeled in tidy handwriting. Someone had cared for this place once. She could care for it again. She turned on the massive range and waited. The burner clicked, then flared to life with a blue flame. Heat washed her hand. A memory rose unbidden. Her mother's kitchen, warm cinnamon drifting through the air, the soft hum of family settling around her as she mixed batter with small, eager hands. Before the prenup, before Eric's rise, before she agreed to let her voice be quiet so his could echo louder. She inhaled deeply and allowed herself to feel the first real hint of purpose since her life had split open at the courthouse. "Good," Michael said behind her, his presence revealed in the soft shuffle of leather shoes on tile. He leaned lightly against the doorframe, watching her with sharp but kind eyes. "You came to the right room. I suspected you might." Vanessa offered him a small, cautious smile. "It is incredible here," she admitted. "The equipment, the space, it feels alive." Michael nodded once. "A house like this needs someone who understands nourishment. It is starved long enough." His gaze softened. "If you choose this path, Vanessa, you will not simply keep this place running, you will give it back its soul. And in doing so, you may find yours again." She swallowed, touched by the steady certainty in his voice. "I want to try," she said. "I do not know if I can, but I want to try." Michael stepped farther into the kitchen, picking up a tarnished copper pot and turning it in his hands. Trying is all a person needs at the beginning. Effort builds courage. Courage builds life. He set the pot down with a soft clank and met her eyes. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we will begin the work. There is much to repair, much to reclaim." Before she could respond, a distant noise carried through the window, the unmistakable sound of raised voices drifting across the street toward Ridgeview Heights. Vanessa stiffened. She stepped closer to the window and pulled back the curtain. Across the road, Eric stood in his driveway, pacing furiously, his gestures wild and sharp even from a distance. Madison hovered beside him, arms crossed, her perfect face twisted into annoyance. Vanessa could not hear their argument through the glass, but she could imagine every word, every blame-shifting sigh. Michael joined her at the window, silent, his expression unreadable. "They look upset," Vanessa murmured. Michael's mouth twitched. "Men like him do not crumble all at once. They crack in stages." He rested a hand lightly on the window frame. "And cracks always find their way toward the truth." Vanessa watched the scene across the street until Eric stormed into the house, slamming the door hard enough for the vibrations to travel through the cold air. Madison followed him inside moments later, her heels clicking sharply against the stone steps. The lights in their windows flickered with frantic motion. Then the house fell still. Vanessa let the curtain fall back into place. "He will not take this well," she said quietly. "The divorce, the debt, the loss of control." Michael inclined his head. "No, he will fight every inch he loses, but fighting does not guarantee winning." He stepped away from the window. "What matters now is that you stop measuring your life by the noise coming from his house." Vanessa breathed in slowly, letting his words settle inside her. The kitchen around her felt strangely warm, almost protective. "I think I understand," she said. Michael gave her a look of approval tinged with something like pride. "Good. Then rest, Miss Brooks. This house needs you at full strength. And tomorrow?" His voice trailed off as he looked around the kitchen with a spark that hinted at secrets and plans she could not yet see. "Tomorrow begins a very different chapter." Vanessa nodded, exhaustion and anticipation weaving together in her chest. As she turned off the burner and left the kitchen behind, she felt for the first time in a long while that she was walking towards something, not running away, not being pushed, walking forward, into the light of a mansion that had been waiting for her, and into a life she had not dared to imagine. Morning arrived quietly at the Grant estate, the kind of soft, pale dawn that spread slowly over the Colorado foothills, turning fresh overnight snow into a field of muted silver. Vanessa woke earlier than she expected, her body trained by years of rising before sunrise to prep dough, check ovens, and coax sweetness from silence. For a moment she lay still, letting the unfamiliar ceiling come into focus. Crown molding traced graceful lines above her. Thick curtains softened the morning light. The sheets beneath her were crisp and warm, in stark contrast to the cold courthouse bench she had imagined herself sleeping on just the day before. She sat up slowly, taking in the room. The old wooden dresser, the faint scent of cedar, the soft hum of heat moving through the vents. It felt like a pause in the middle of a storm, a reprieve offered by a stranger whose intentions she still could not fully read. She dressed in the clean clothes she had washed in the bathroom sink the night before, twisting her hair into a simple knot. When she stepped into the hallway, the house greeted her with a peaceful stillness. No hurried footsteps, no slammed doors, no Madison's shrill laughter echoing against cold marble. Only the hum of quiet machinery and the crackling whisper of a heating system that had been tended to carefully, perhaps by Michael himself. Vanessa descended the staircase, her fingers grazing the railing, and made her way toward the kitchen, her sanctuary, the one place where her instincts were sharpest and her heart always felt steady. The kitchen was dimly lit, morning light filtering through tall windows that framed the snowy yard. The air smelled faintly of old flour and cool stone. Vanessa moved to the pantry and found ingredients she knew by heart: flour, sugar, yeast, butter, eggs. Her hands acted before she fully decided. She tied one of the aprons hanging on the hook beside the counter, its fabric worn soft, and began assembling dough. She mixed, kneaded, folded, then set it aside to rise while she preheated the ovens. As the ovens hummed to life, warmth spread across the stone floor, and it felt like the house exhaled in relief. The scent of rising dough soon cut through the dusty air like a promise. She did not hear Michael enter. She only sensed him when the room shifted slightly, as though a change in pressure warned her of another presence. She turned and found him standing at the threshold, his hair still damp from a morning shower, dressed in a dark sweater and clean slacks that made him look younger, stronger, almost regal in an understated way. His eyes followed her movements with a keen awareness that bordered on reverence. "You have been busy," he said, and the compliment carried real weight, not flattery. Vanessa shrugged lightly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Old habits," she said. "The kitchen feels right." Michael nodded. "This house has been asleep too long. It senses care. It responds." He stepped farther in, studying the dough she had set to rise. "You work with intention. That is rarer than talent." Vanessa felt a small, unexpected flutter at the praise, but she kept her tone even. "I just do what I know. What I've always known." Michael turned his gaze to the windows, his jaw tensing slightly. "Across the street, chaos is brewing. I watched your former husband pacing his driveway at sunrise. He received visitors. Lawyers, I believe." Vanessa stiffened. "Already?" Michael gave a slow nod. Men like Eric do not wait for disaster to unfold. They scramble early, trying to stop the bleeding before others smell the wound. Vanessa moved to the counter, gripping its edge. "He will try to take something from you," she murmured, "or from me. He will not accept defeat." Michael made a thoughtful noise. "He has already lost more than he understands, and I am not concerned with his tantrums. But you—" He paused, studying her with a piercing gentleness. "He will try to diminish you again. It is his nature." Vanessa lowered her eyes. "I know," she whispered. "I lived inside that nature for years." Michael approached the counter, resting his hand lightly on the copper edge. "You are no longer under his roof," he reminded her. "You are under mine, and I protect what is mine." Vanessa lifted her gaze, startled by the firmness in his voice. She opened her mouth to respond, but the timer on the oven chimed softly. She turned away to check the first batch of rolls, the steam rising from the tray carrying a warmth that wrapped around her shoulders like reassurance. She arranged the fresh rolls on a large ceramic platter, draping a cloth over them to keep the heat in. When she set the platter on the central island, Michael accepted one without waiting for permission and bit into it with a quiet sigh. "This," he said after a long chew, "will make the entire county forget that the Jacobs name ever meant anything in this town." Vanessa blinked at him. "They are just rolls," she said cautiously. Michael shook his head. "Not to people who have forgotten what real care tastes like, not to people who have grown used to mediocrity disguised as elegance." His mouth tightened. Eric built his reputation on flash, but substance wins in the end. Vanessa swallowed hard, unsure whether he meant the rolls or her life. His words lingered in the air as she finished cleaning the workspace. When she finally allowed herself to step away from the island, Michael gestured toward the hallway. "Walk with me," he said. "You should see the rest of the estate. If you are to manage it, you must know it." They moved through long corridors lined with portraits in gilded frames, their subjects gazing down with stern eyes from another century. Vanessa studied the details: the carved fireplace in the parlor, the sprawling library filled with leather-bound books, the ballroom with chandeliers that looked like frozen galaxies. This house had been built for gatherings, for life, for legacy. And somehow it had ended up in the hands of a man who chose invisibility over spectacle. They paused at the tall windows overlooking Ridgeview Heights. Eric's house loomed across the road, the snow around it disturbed by the frantic pacing of lawyers and landscapers. Cars came and went, crunching loudly over the icy driveway. Madison appeared briefly at the door, her robe wrapped tightly around her, her hair a tangled cloud that suggested a sleepless night. She argued with someone inside the house, her gestures sharp and indignant. Nothing about the scene surprised Vanessa, but watching it from the safety of Michael's estate made it feel distant, like a play she had once starred in, but no longer remembered the lines for. "Trouble," Michael said simply, nodding toward the chaos. "He has dug himself deeper than he knows." Vanessa's voice softened. "And Madison?" Michael snorted quietly. "She did not choose him for his stability. She will not stay when the ground under her heels begins to crack." Vanessa looked down at her hands. "She will leave him," she said. "She will run at the first real sign of collapse." Michael's eyes flicked to her. "You speak with certainty." Vanessa's throat tightened. "I would know. He has always surrounded himself with people who stay only as long as the lights shine on him." Michael regarded her with an expression she could not decipher. Then he placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Let the house across the street worry about its own rot," he said. "This place," he added, sweeping his arm toward the vast interior, "is where your future sits. Not behind you, in front of you." Vanessa breathed in deeply, letting his words settle into the quiet corners of her chest. She turned from the window and followed Michael deeper into the mansion, her steps lighter now, her pulse steadier. She had no idea what storms lay ahead, but for the first time in far too long, she knew where she stood, and she was not standing alone. By late afternoon, the estate had begun to thaw in more ways than one. Vanessa spent the hours cleaning small corners of the kitchen, reorganizing shelves, and wiping a layer of dust from the windowsills while batches of pastries rose beneath linen towels. The warm scent of cinnamon and rising dough drifted through the hallways, slipping under closed doors and curling up the grand staircase like an invitation. For the first time in years, she worked without a sense of being watched, judged, or timed. Eric had measured everything she did: how long she spent baking, how much she spent on eggs, how many weekends she dedicated to his corporate events. Here, in this quiet, forgotten mansion, every step she took felt like her own. Shortly before sunset, Michael reappeared in the kitchen doorway with a folder tucked beneath his arm. His expression was calm, but there was a tightness around his eyes that hinted at a day spent wrestling with more than paperwork. "There is something you should see," he said, his voice low enough that Vanessa felt her heartbeat shift. She wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron and followed him into the front hall, where he handed her the folder. Inside were neatly printed financial statements, property documents, and a list of account holdings that made Vanessa's eyes widen. She skimmed the pages, confused at first, then stunned by what they revealed. "These are his accounts," she whispered, unable to say Eric's name. "His business accounts, his credit lines, his—" Her voice trailed off as she turned another page. The numbers were grim. Overdue payments, frozen accounts, notes from lenders warning of legal action. Her breath tightened. "This is a collapse," she murmured. "He is imploding." Michael nodded slowly. "A house cannot be built on vanity," he said. "It always sinks." Vanessa stared at the documents, struggling to reconcile the image of Eric, confident, cruel, invincible, with the man pacing his driveway in panic earlier that morning. "How did you get these?" she asked quietly. Michael gave her a pointed look. "People speak when they are afraid," he said, "and Eric has left many frightened people behind." The words settled over her like an unraveling thread. Vanessa closed the folder and handed it back. "I do not want revenge," she said slowly, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Not really. I just want my life to stop orbiting around his ruin." Michael studied her for a long moment, his gaze calculating and thoughtful. "Revenge is often mistaken for justice," he said, "but they are not the same. And you are not the kind of woman who wants either. You simply want peace." Vanessa exhaled, feeling a tremor of gratitude. "Exactly." Michael tucked the folder under his arm and gestured toward the window. "Come," he said. "Look." Together they stepped toward the tall glass panes overlooking Ridgeview Heights. Across the street, the lights in Eric's house flared with frantic movement. Several unfamiliar cars were parked haphazardly along the driveway. Luxury sedans with tinted windows, the kind used by lawyers, investors, or those delivering bad news. Vanessa watched as Eric stormed out the front door, shouting at a man in a gray coat who did not flinch. Madison followed him out moments later, her hair wild, her face contorted with anger. Even from this distance, the tension between them crackled. "That," Michael murmured, "is the first tremor before a landslide." Vanessa's stomach twisted as she watched Eric rake his hands through his hair, shouting at Madison with an intensity that made her flinch. Madison retaliated with gestures sharp enough to slice the air. Then, without warning, she threw her purse at him. It hit his chest and landed in the snow. She turned on her heel and marched back inside, slamming the door hard enough to make the porch light tremble. Vanessa pressed a hand lightly to her lips. "They are falling apart," she whispered. A shadow of something passed over Michael's expression. Not satisfaction, but the wary patience of a man who had learned that destruction can ricochet unpredictably. "When pride is threatened," he said, "men like Eric lash out, not strategically, instinctively. An instinct is dangerous when paired with fear." Vanessa looked at the dark windows of the mansion across the road. "He will do something reckless." "Yes," Michael replied quietly, "and when he does, the fallout will be wide." He turned from the window and addressed her with a tone of finality. "Which is why you must be cautious. Do not speak with him. Do not respond if he reaches out. Do not let your empathy become a doorway he can re-enter." Vanessa opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. He was right. Eric fed on second chances and soft hearts. Hers had nearly cost her everything. The doorbell suddenly rang, cutting through the quiet like a knife. Vanessa stiffened. Michael lifted a hand, silently instructing her to stay put, then strode toward the foyer with a calm that belied the alertness in his posture. Vanessa hovered in the hallway, listening. The front door opened, and a gust of cold air swept in, carrying muffled voices. A man spoke first, stern, practiced, and official. Then another voice joined in, lower, almost apologetic. After a moment, the door closed. Michael returned alone. His expression was controlled, but Vanessa saw the tension in the set of his jaw. "Who was it?" she asked. "Sheriff's office," he said. "Routine inquiry. They received a noise complaint from Ridgeview Heights." Vanessa blinked. "From Eric's house? It seems your former husband began shouting in the street. Again." Michael gave a dry, humorless sigh. "I assured them the disturbance did not come from here, but they will be circling the neighborhood more often now. The sheriff knows trouble when he smells it." Vanessa sank onto the nearest chair, rubbing her temples. "He will blame me for everything," she murmured. "The divorce, his debts, Madison's frustration, even the sheriff showing up." Michael stepped closer, his presence steady and grounding. "Let him blame," he said. Blame changes nothing. But your choices, those will shape everything that comes next. Vanessa lifted her eyes to meet his, and something inside her steadied. Michael held her gaze another moment before turning toward the kitchen. Come, let us finish your preparations. There is work to be done, and work is a salve. Vanessa rose and followed him, feeling the weight in her chest loosen slightly. As she re-entered the warm, fragrant kitchen, she inhaled deeply. The scent of fresh rolls and rising dough filled her lungs like courage. Whatever chaos churned across the street, whatever storms Eric prepared to unleash, Vanessa knew one thing with quiet certainty. This house, this sanctuary, was no longer just a place to hide. It was the ground where she would rebuild herself. The next day began with a tension that clung to the air like static. Vanessa felt it the moment she stepped into the hallway after waking. The mansion was quiet, but not in the peaceful way it had been the previous morning. It was the kind of stillness that suggested the world outside its walls had shifted overnight, leaving the house bracing itself for whatever came next. She descended the staircase slowly, her hand trailing along the polished railing, and made her way toward the kitchen. She expected to find Michael already awake, perhaps in the study, as he had been the day before. Instead, she found him standing at the kitchen island with a newspaper spread open, his expression carved with deep lines of concentration. She paused in the doorway, watching him. He looked older in that moment, not weaker, but burdened by the kind of knowledge that never arrived without consequence. Michael lifted his gaze and scanned her face with a softness that contrasted with the steel beneath his voice. "You should eat," he said, gesturing toward a plate he had already prepared with fresh fruit, toast, and a mug of herbal tea. "Today may be a long day." Vanessa approached the island, her pulse quickening. "What happened?" she asked. "You look—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Concerned." Michael closed the newspaper with measured calm and slid it aside. "Your former husband has made headlines," he said. "Local ones for now, though they will not stay local." Vanessa felt her breath catch. What kind of headlines? Michael handed her the newspaper without ceremony. At the top of the front page, a bold headline stretched across the print. "Developer under fire after reports of financial misconduct and unsafe construction practices." Below the headline sat a photo of Eric standing next to a partially constructed luxury home, his smile wide and confident, his eyes betraying nothing of the panic she had seen in him the previous days. The article detailed accusations from former employees claiming unpaid wages, subcontractors reporting delayed payments, and inspectors raising concerns about corners cut on several recent projects. It described lawsuits filed against his company, strained relationships with lenders, and whispers of deeper financial instability. Vanessa read the article slowly, her heart sinking with each paragraph. Though she had lived beside Eric's ego for years, she had not fully realized how far he had allowed his empire to rot from the inside. When she lowered the newspaper, Michael watched her with a measured expression. "This is the first crack the public will see," he said. "A small one. The rest will widen soon enough." Vanessa set the newspaper on the counter, steadying herself with a hand against the cool marble. "He will blame me," she whispered. "He will say I caused this, that the divorce destroyed him. He will twist every word." Michael inclined his head slightly. "He will try. But his fall is of his own making. People who live on illusions cannot blame gravity when they slip." Vanessa exhaled slowly, the weight of everything pressing down. "I do not want this for him," she said. "Not like this. Not humiliation." Michael studied her, his gaze kind yet unyielding. "Compassion is admirable," he said, "but you must be careful not to rewrite history in your mind. He humiliated you for years. He discarded you without remorse. He weaponized your kindness." Vanessa swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I know, but watching someone collapse is not satisfying." Michael's voice softened but remained firm. "And that is why you will rise, Vanessa. You do not carry vengeance in your heart, only honesty." He stepped closer, resting his hand on the back of a chair. "Still," he added, "his unraveling does not leave you untouched. You must brace yourself." Vanessa hesitated. "Brace myself for what?" Michael's expression hardened. "For the moment he comes here." A chill slid down her spine. He would not. He would, Michael replied calmly, and he will. He has lost control of his home, his reputation, his finances, and his carefully curated image. When men lose their mirrors, they seek the nearest surface to reflect their anger. You are familiar. You are easy to blame. And you are the one thing he can still imagine he owns. Vanessa took a step back, her breath trembling. What should I do? Michael sank into one of the kitchen chairs, folding his hands in front of him. You will not answer the door, he said. You will not step outside. You will not speak to him. If he arrives shouting, you will stay here. I will handle him. Vanessa frowned. I do not want a confrontation between you two. It will not be a confrontation, Michael replied. It will be clarity. He motioned toward the window, and Vanessa reluctantly turned to look across the road. Eric's house was a flurry of movement. Cars parked erratically in the driveway. Men in suits walked briskly to and from the entrance. A moving truck idled by the curb. Madison appeared for a moment, her face twisted in frustration as she barked into her phone, pacing the steps in her designer robe. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman who had mocked Vanessa at the courthouse just days earlier. She looked cornered. Vanessa watched in stunned silence as Madison gestured wildly toward Eric, who slammed the door in her face. She pounded on it with both fists, screaming something unintelligible. After a tense minute, she stomped past the men in suits, climbed into her car, and squealed out of the driveway, fishtailing in the snow. The tires left jagged scars in the slush. Michael approached the window beside her. The castle is crumbling, he murmured, and the queen has fled. Vanessa's fingers curled around the curtain. This makes him more dangerous, she said quietly. He will spiral. Yes, Michael agreed, and spiraling men latch onto the nearest anchor, even if that anchor is the person they once tried to drown. Vanessa turned away from the window, her heart pounding. I do not want to be his anchor. Then do not be, Michael replied simply. This house is sanctuary. Use it. She pressed a hand to her chest. I do not want him here. He will not cross this threshold, Michael said with steady certainty. Not while I draw breath. Vanessa felt a strange warmth at those words, something between relief and trust. She picked up the plate of fruit he had prepared for her and took a slow bite, trying to steady her nerves. Michael watched her eat, his expression unreadable but deeply attentive. You are stronger than you realize, he said softly, but strength grows fastest when it is protected. As she finished breakfast, Vanessa glanced once more toward the mansion across the street. The chaos there had intensified. The false world Eric built was collapsing plank by plank, and she understood, with a clarity that both frightened and empowered her, that his unraveling was no longer her responsibility. She had stepped out of his life. Now she had to stay out of the path of his fall. The storm broke later that afternoon. It began not with thunder or snow or any dramatic sign from the sky, but with the distant growl of an engine Vanessa recognized immediately. She had heard it countless times, the particular rumble of the Escalade's oversized tires crunching over gravel, the impatient rev of the engine when Eric wanted to announce his presence before he was even seen. Vanessa froze in the hallway outside the library, a stack of linen tablecloths in her arms. Her breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat. She turned just enough to see through the tall front windows. The Escalade rolled to a stop directly in front of the estate's gates, its headlights cutting through the pale winter afternoon like twin spears. Michael appeared beside her almost instantaneously, as though he had been expecting this exact moment. He placed a steady hand on her arm and gently guided her a few steps back from the window. Do not stand where he can see you, he said quietly. He will use sight to fuel his performance. She swallowed hard. He came. I knew he would. Yes, Michael replied, and now we will see the shape of his desperation. Outside, the Escalade idled loudly, exhaust curling up into the cold air. The gates remained closed, their wrought iron bars forming a dark lattice that separated Eric from the estate he had mocked, ignored, and now suddenly coveted. Vanessa watched from the shadows as Eric stepped out of the car and slammed the door. He wore a heavy coat over a suit that looked hastily thrown on, as if he had been pulled from a meeting or an argument. His hair was uncombed, sticking up in frantic lines that made him appear less polished, more frantic. He strode toward the gate and grabbed the bars, shaking them violently. "Open the gate!" he shouted. "I know you're in there!" His voice echoed across the snow-covered grounds, bouncing off the stone walls of the mansion behind her. Vanessa flinched at the sound. She had heard that voice in their kitchen, in their car, on nights when his temper surged for reasons she could never predict. The sound wrapped around her like cold wires, pulling her back to moments she wished she could forget. Michael sensed her reaction and stepped slightly in front of her, placing himself like a shield. Eric continued shouting, his breath forming clouds of furious vapor. "Vanessa, I know you can hear me. We are not done." His hand slammed against the metal again. "Open this damn gate!" Michael exhaled calmly, then began walking toward the front door. Vanessa grabbed his sleeve instinctively. "Please do not provoke him," she whispered. "He is unpredictable when he feels cornered." Michael gave her a reassuring look. "I am not provoking him. I am ending this." He rested his hand briefly over hers. "Stay inside. Do not come to the door. And whatever you hear, do not speak." She nodded, her chest tight, her pulse trembling at the base of her throat. Michael stepped outside, closing the heavy door behind him with a resonant thud. Vanessa hurried to the adjacent parlor window, where she could watch without being seen. Outside, Michael walked down the front steps with a slow, deliberate pace, his posture straight, his expression carved in stillness. Eric's shouting faltered as he saw him. Confusion flickered across Eric's face. Michael did not raise his voice. He did not quicken his steps. He simply approached until he stood a few paces from the gate, his hands resting lightly behind his back. When he spoke, his tone carried the weight of a man who did not need to shout to be heard. "Mr. Jacobs," Michael said, "you are trespassing." Eric blinked. "Trespassing?" he repeated with a laugh that cracked at the edges. "This is not your place. This is some abandoned ruin. Now open the gate and send out my wife." Michael regarded him calmly. "She is not your wife." Eric's face twitched. "She will always be my wife." "No," Michael said. "Your marriage ended 2 days ago, legally, irrevocably. You have no standing here." Eric's grip on the iron tightened. "She owes me answers." "She owes you nothing," Michael replied, "and you will not speak to her." Eric scoffed. "You think she will listen to you? You think you can hide her from me?" "I am not hiding her," Michael said. "I am protecting her." A flush crept up Eric's neck, shifting into a livid red. Protecting her from what? From me? Michael nodded once. "Yes." The word struck Eric like a slap. He stepped back, his laugh sour and sharp. "Who the hell are you?" Michael tilted his head slightly, as if the question barely mattered. "I am the man who owns the property across the street," he said. "The one you live in." Eric's expression froze. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then the reality began to break over him in jagged pieces. "You're lying," he choked out. "That house is mine. I built it. You mortgaged it to lenders who sold the debt," Michael said calmly. "I acquired it. Quietly. Legally. Efficiently." Eric staggered back a half step as though the snow beneath him had become unstable. "No," he whispered. "No, you cannot." "I can," Michael said, "and I did." Eric sputtered with fury. "You did something. You manipulated something. You got her to—" Michael cut him off, his tone still quiet but edged with steel. "This collapse is entirely your own doing. You drove the nails, you placed the beams. Now the structure is falling." Eric let out a ragged breath and slammed his fist against the gate. "I want to speak to her." "You will not," Michael said. "She is my responsibility." "She is not," Michael corrected. Eric's eyes narrowed, desperation sharpening his voice. "She will regret siding with you." Michael's gaze didn't waver. "She has sided with herself. That is the one thing you never allowed." The silence that followed was colder than the wind. Eric's rage trembled at the edges, losing its footing, turning into something more raw and unstable. He pushed a hand through his hair and shouted toward the windows of the mansion. "Vanessa, come out here, now!" Vanessa recoiled from the sound, her hands flying to her mouth. She could feel the old instinct pulling at her. The instinct to step out, soothe him, calm the storm, give him what he needed to feel in control again. Her entire body recognized the familiar choreography, but her feet remained still. She stayed in the shadows, not moving toward the door, not answering the voice that had dictated her life for so long. Michael stepped closer to the gate, his voice lowering further. "If you continue shouting, I will call the sheriff. They already visited your house once. They will be less patient the second time." Eric's eyes darted wildly. "This is not over," he spat. "She will talk to me. I will make her." Michael shook his head. "No, you will not." For a moment, Eric simply stared. At Michael, at the house behind him, at the pieces of his life slipping through his fingers. Then he turned sharply, marched back to the Escalade and, without looking back, peeled away from the estate in a blast of snow and exhaust. Michael remained standing by the gate until the sound of the engine faded. When he finally turned and walked back toward the front steps, his expression stayed unreadable. Vanessa backed away from the window and met him in the foyer as he stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. "He will come again," she whispered. "Yes," Michael said, "but next time he will be weaker." Vanessa pressed a hand to her heart, grounding herself. "I was afraid." Michael's expression softened. "Courage does not mean you feel no fear," he said. "It means you choose not to obey it." For the first time in her life, Vanessa believed she truly understood that difference. That evening, the house took on an unfamiliar stillness, heavier than before, the kind that settles over a place after something significant has crossed its threshold, or in this case, after something dangerous has been kept out. Vanessa moved through the mansion with quiet steps, carrying a tray of freshly baked rolls toward the dining room, though neither she nor Michael had much appetite. The confrontation at the gate lingered in the air like residue from an explosion, the shock still vibrating through the walls even as twilight deepened and the chandelier warmed the hallways with its amber glow. Every few minutes, Vanessa found herself pausing to listen, half expecting the Escalade to return, half fearing she might hear her former name shouted across the snow again, but the road remained empty. In the dining room, Michael sat at the long mahogany table, an untouched cup of tea cooling beside him. He had removed his coat, revealing a charcoal sweater that softened the sternness of his silhouette, but his posture remained rigid. He looked up when she entered, the tension in his face briefly easing. "You do not need to serve dinner tonight," he said. "You have had enough strain for one day." Vanessa set the tray on a linen runner anyway. "I need to move," she replied. "If I sit still, my mind will race." Michael nodded, as though he understood that better than he wanted to admit. She took a seat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. For a long moment they sat in silence, the only sound the faint crackle of the old radiators stirring to life. Finally, Michael spoke. "You handled yourself well today." Vanessa let out a soft, humorless laugh. "I did nothing. I hid behind curtains while you confronted him." Michael shook his head. "Courage is not always a matter of facing the monster head-on. Sometimes it is simply refusing to open the door." Vanessa looked at him closely, searching his face. "You were calm," she said, "almost too calm. How did you keep from shouting back?" His eyes clouded with memory. "I have lived long enough to know that anger is a currency best spent by fools," he said. "Your former husband was bankrupt in more ways than one. There was nothing to engage with." She studied him more carefully then. The deep lines etched into the corners of his eyes, the faint shadows beneath them, the quiet gravity that never seemed to leave him. She had never asked why he lived alone in this mansion, why he allowed rumors to swirl about his disappearance, why he hid in plain sight behind the guise of a homeless man outside the courthouse. A dozen questions hovered at the edge of her tongue, but she held them back. Michael had given her safety without asking anything in return. She owed him patience. After a long silence, he rose from the table. "There is something I need to show you," he said. "Come." She followed him out of the dining room, down the corridor, and toward a large wooden door she had not noticed before. He unlocked it and pushed it open to reveal a room lit by a single lamp. Inside, tall filing cabinets lined the walls, each drawer meticulously labeled. A long work table sat in the center of the room, covered in blueprints, photographs, and documents spread in organized clusters. Vanessa stepped inside cautiously. "What is this?" Michael closed the door behind them. "The history of this estate," he said, "and the future of it. If you are to manage this place, you must understand what you are inheriting, not legally, but in responsibility." He moved to one of the cabinets and slid open a drawer. Inside were folders labeled with dates and names that stretched back more than a century. He pulled one out and handed it to her. "The Grant family built this house before the first stone of Cedar Falls was ever laid," he said. "My great-grandfather designed it. My grandfather expanded it. My father preserved it. But each generation lost a piece of it, distracted by ambition or war or debt. I have spent most of my life trying to recover what they let slip away." Vanessa opened the folder and found black and white photographs of the estate in its early years. Lush gardens, elegant soirees, families standing proudly on the front steps. The house looked alive then, vibrant, a place where community thrived. "It was beautiful," she murmured. "It still is," Michael said, "but it is sleeping. Neglect has a way of eroding the spirit of a place. I intend to wake it." He walked to the work table, picking up a rolled blueprint and spreading it flat. "This," he said, "is the original layout of the greenhouse." Vanessa leaned over the table, tracing the lines of the structure with her eyes. "You have a greenhouse?" Michael nodded. "Hidden beneath the snow, behind the west wing. Once it produced enough fruit and vegetables to feed not only the estate, but also the local community during hard seasons. People used to gather here. Families from town, travelers, workers. The estate was the heart of Cedar Falls." His voice darkened. "Until greed, short-sightedness, and neglect turned it into a monument of isolation." Vanessa lifted her gaze to him. "And you want to bring it back." Michael nodded. "I want this place to be more than stone and memory. I want it to breathe again, and I cannot do it alone." She stared at him, the weight of his words settling over her with surprising warmth. "You want me to help," she said softly, "not just as a cook or a housekeeper." Michael shook his head. "No, as a steward, a partner in restoration." Her throat tightened. "I do not know if I deserve that kind of trust." "Perhaps not," Michael said gently, "but people rarely receive what they deserve. They receive what they claim, and you have claimed more courage in the past few days than you have in years." Before Vanessa could respond, a sudden loud bang echoed faintly from somewhere outside, a car door slamming across the road. Vanessa flinched, instinctively stepping closer to Michael. He lifted a hand, signaling her to stay still. They listened carefully. Voices drifted faintly from Ridgeview Heights, angry and sharp, though not close enough to understand. After a few tense moments, the noise faded. Michael turned to her, his expression composed but grave. "The outside world is breaking," he said, "and broken things make desperate moves. We must be prepared." Vanessa took a slow breath, grounding herself in the warmth of the lamp, the scent of old paper, the steady presence of the man beside her. "What do we do?" she asked. Michael studied her with a measured calm. "We rebuild here," he said, "and let the storm collapse itself." Vanessa stepped closer to the blueprint, her fingers grazing the faded ink. Something blossomed inside her, a cautious sense of purpose she had not felt in years. She was no longer simply surviving the aftermath of a broken marriage. She was standing at the threshold of something meaningful, something alive. A house waiting to be revived, a man who saw potential where others saw ruin, and a life she never expected to have. She squared her shoulders and met Michael's eyes. "All right," she said. "Show me where to begin." The next morning dawned with an eerie quiet that seeped into every corner of the Grant estate. Vanessa awoke before sunrise, unsettled by the feeling that something beyond the walls had shifted again. The house itself felt alert, as though listening, waiting. She dressed quickly and stepped into the hallway where cold air brushed her skin, despite the vents humming softly. It was not fear she felt, not exactly, but anticipation wrapped in a thin layer of tension, the kind that warns a person the world outside is trembling. She found Michael already awake in the kitchen, seated at the table with a stack of legal papers spread before him. His reading glasses rested halfway down his nose, making him look like the kind of professor who could silence a room with a single raised eyebrow. He glanced up when she entered, his gaze sharp, measuring her expression before she even spoke. "Did you sleep?" he asked. Vanessa nodded with a small, dishonest shrug. A little. Michael removed his glasses and set them aside. You need rest, he said. The days ahead may be more demanding than the ones behind. She poured herself a cup of tea, inhaling the steam as if it might steady her heartbeat. Is it Eric again? Michael did not answer immediately. Instead, he tapped one of the legal documents with his index finger. His house is no longer his, he said calmly. The lenders initiated foreclosure proceedings faster than I expected. He must have defaulted on more than we knew. Vanessa nearly dropped her mug. So soon? Desperation accelerates collapse, Michael replied. And men like him rely on the illusion of being untouchable. When the illusion shatters, everything beneath it crumbles. Vanessa sat across from him. He will blame you. He already does, Michael said dryly. He left a message with my attorney last night, a series of increasingly irrational claims. Vanessa felt her stomach knot. And me? Michael's expression softened. You are the ghost haunting his conscience. He will try to chase you, not because you wronged him, but because losing control of you symbolizes losing control of his narrative. She wrapped both hands around her tea, grounding herself against the warmth. He is capable of anything right now, she whispered. Michael nodded. Which is why today we take precautions. He stood and walked to a small cabinet beside the pantry. From it, he pulled a sleek, modern security tablet. The screen flickered to life, revealing a grid of camera feeds. The gates, the driveway, the grounds surrounding the west wing, even the faint outline of the old greenhouse buried under snow. Vanessa stared at it, stunned. You have surveillance? Michael raised an eyebrow. You believe a man like me lives in a house like this without eyes? He pointed to several feeds. These cameras are discreet, not visible from outside. They were installed years ago, long before rumors claimed the estate had fallen into decay. Vanessa studied the screen more closely. She recognized the distant line of Ridgeview Heights across one of the monitors. Eric's driveway was visible, though empty, the snow smoothed by wind. He is not home, she murmured. Not now, Michael agreed, and not because he is working. As of this morning, he no longer has access to the office he once commanded. Vanessa looked at him sharply. He was removed? Unanimously, Michael replied. His business partners froze him out. They had no choice. Investors are fleeing. Inspections are being ordered. Lawsuits are multiplying. Michael leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. He built his empire on borrowed bricks and borrowed trust. Now both have collapsed. Vanessa swallowed. And where is he? Michael's gaze darkened. That is the troubling part. No one seems to know. A shiver crept up her spine. What do you mean? He left his house shortly before dawn, Michael said. Alone, without his phone. Vanessa's throat tightened. That is not a good sign. No, Michael agreed. It is not. For several moments they stood together in silence, both staring at the empty driveway across the screen. Then Michael straightened with quiet authority. We stay here today, he said. No errands. No stepping outside. The gate remains closed. Vanessa nodded slowly. All right. Michael set the tablet down and shifted to a small stack of folders on the counter. There is another matter, he said, his voice lowering with significance. A more delicate one, concerning the estate. Vanessa lifted her gaze. What is it? He opened a folder and slid it toward her. Inside were property maps, legal notices, and a stamped letter from the County Preservation Board. This land, he said, tapping the map, is protected under historic landmark status. Any alterations require oversight and approval. Your former husband once attempted to expand his driveway into the edge of this protected zone. Vanessa's breath stilled. What? Michael nodded. He was stopped. Barely. Had he succeeded, he would have damaged the foundation of the original greenhouse. Vanessa felt anger rise in her chest, anger mixed with disbelief and the old familiar ache of realizing how little Eric had respected boundaries, history, or anyone's property, but his own. He never told me, she whispered. I lived with him all that time and he never said a word. Because he never saw it as wrong, Michael said. To him, inconvenience is something inflicted, not experienced. Vanessa stared at the maps, her pulse rising. So he wanted to claim part of this estate? He wanted to claim whatever he thought he could get away with, Michael replied. The law stopped him then. It will stop him again. He paused, his voice growing somber. But legal boundaries mean little to a man who believes the world owes him restitution. Those words hung in the air like fog, thick and heavy. Vanessa closed the folder and took a slow breath. Tell me what you need me to do. Michael's expression softened at her resolve. For now, nothing, he said. Your task today is simply to remain aware, to listen, to stay inside the safety of these walls. He gestured to the map again. This house was designed to withstand more than storms. It will hold. She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. Michael stepped closer, lowering his voice. I will not allow harm to reach you. Something steadied within her at the confidence in that promise. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Vanessa cleaned the kitchen, organized spice drawers, and tended to dough resting beneath warm cloths. Yet her eyes drifted constantly to the windows, half expecting the Escalade to appear through the frost-glazed glass. Every sound, a tree limb tapping the window, a distant car on the road, even the furnace cycling, made her nerves jolt in her chest. Shortly after noon, as Vanessa was shaping loaves on the marble counter, she felt an abrupt ripple in the air, a shift so subtle yet unmistakable that she looked up before any actual noise reached her ears. She stepped to the nearest window, heart pounding. Snow drifted lazily outside. But something was different. A dark shape lingered just beyond the trees near the edge of the estate. Vanessa squinted. The shape moved, a slow, scraping movement, as if someone were trudging through the snow toward the back of the property. Her breath hitched. "Michael!" she called, her voice tight. He appeared in the doorway instantly. "What is it?" She pointed. "Movement, behind the west wing." Michael stepped beside her, narrowing his eyes. The shape moved again, disappearing briefly behind the skeletal outline of dormant branches. His jaw tightened. "That," he said, "is exactly what I expected." Vanessa's pulse quickened. "Is it him?" Michael did not look away from the window. "It is someone who should not be here," he said calmly. He turned toward her, voice low and deliberate. "Stay in the kitchen. Do not open any doors. And no matter what you hear, do not come outside." Vanessa felt her heartbeat hammering in her ribs as he strode toward the back hall. Something was coming. Something neither of them could ignore now. And the storm had finally crossed the boundary of the estate. The house seemed to hold its breath as Michael disappeared down the back corridor. Vanessa remained rooted in the kitchen doorway, her pulse thundering in her ears, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter until her knuckles whitened. She wanted to follow him. She wanted to run. She wanted to pretend the shadow she'd seen was a trick of the light. But the look in Michael's eyes when he told her to stay, calm, steady, cold with certainty, pinned her in place like an invisible hand. The estate had felt like sanctuary until this moment. Now it felt like a fortress under watch, its old bones bracing for intrusion. The minutes stretched, thick with silence except for the faint hum of the oven and the distant groan of pipes. Vanessa stepped closer to the window, fingers trembling as she eased the curtain aside. Snowflakes drifted lazily, shimmering in the pale light, but the west grounds remained obscured by the dense cluster of bare trees and the faint outline of the dormant greenhouse. She saw no movement now, nothing but the expanse of white and shadow, and yet the feeling lingered, that sense of being observed, of something pacing just out of sight. She forced herself away from the window and returned to the counter, pretending to busy her hands with folding kitchen towels, but she kept glancing toward the hall where Michael had vanished. When a sudden noise echoed faintly from somewhere deeper in the estate, a muted thud, followed by the creak of old wood, she froze again. Her breath caught in her throat. Another sound followed, sharper this time, like the metallic rattle of a latch being tested. Vanessa's heart pounded painfully. Someone was trying doors. She moved quickly but silently toward the pantry, scanning the shelves until she found what she needed, a heavy iron skillet. It was ridiculous, she knew, laughable even, but the cold weight of it in her hands steadied her. She gripped it tightly, positioning herself near the kitchen island where she could at least see the entrances. She told herself she wasn't preparing for a fight. She was preparing to survive long enough for Michael to return. A faint crunch of snow outside drew her attention again. She turned toward the back window. and gasped softly. A figure stood near the greenhouse. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, still. He wore a dark coat, thick and heavy, hood down despite the cold, his hair catching the faint shimmer of snow. His posture was rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. He wasn't approaching anymore, he was simply staring at the house, motionless as if trying to memorize every brick and shadow. Even at this distance, even through the frost-edged glass, Vanessa knew who it was. Eric. Her breath left her in one sharp exhale. He wasn't at the gate this time. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't pounding on metal. He was behind the estate, on protected land, in the one place no visitor had a right to step. He looked nothing like the man she'd known. His face was gaunt with exhaustion, eyes darkened by sleeplessness and fury. His coat hung open, revealing a suit, wrinkled as though he'd slept in it or fought someone in it. The cold wind whipped at his hair, but he didn't react. He simply stared at the mansion with a focus so intense it sent a shudder down her spine. Vanessa backed away from the window, clutching the skillet to her chest. She opened her mouth to call Michael, but before she could make a sound, the kitchen door swung softly inward. She spun, skillet raised, heart stopping. Michael stepped inside, breath visible in the cold air that clung to him, snow speckling his coat. His eyes scanned her posture immediately. "Put that down," he said quietly. "It is not necessary." Vanessa's knees weakened with relief. "He's here," she whispered. "Eric, behind the greenhouse. I saw him." Michael nodded without surprise. "I know." "You saw him?" Vanessa's voice shook. "Then why are we just standing here? We have to call the sheriff. He cannot be on private land. Michael raised a hand. He was not alone. Vanessa blinked. "What do you mean?" Michael shut the door behind him, locking it with a decisive click before stepping closer. "He brought someone with him," Michael said. "A man hired to intimidate or assist. I do not yet know his intent, but it is not casual trespassing." He paused, his gaze sharp. "And now he knows the blind spots he thought he could exploit are not actually blind." Vanessa felt her blood turn to ice. "He hired someone?" Michael nodded. "A man I recognized, a former subcontractor of his, dismissed without pay last year. A man with more muscle than loyalty." Vanessa pressed a hand over her mouth. "This is madness. He is unraveling." "Unraveling men do not think," Michael said softly. "They react." He guided her toward a chair, but she shook her head. "What if he tries to break in? What if he tries to—" "He will not," Michael cut in. "He is posturing, testing boundaries. He wants you afraid." Vanessa felt her breath tremble. "It worked," she whispered. Michael paused, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Fear does not mean weakness. It means awareness." He rested a steady hand on her shoulder. "And awareness is how we protect ourselves." She nodded, though the tremor in her chest did not lessen. Michael glanced toward the west wing again, his jaw tightening. "He is gone now," he said. "Both of them. They left when they realized someone was watching." Vanessa rose, her hands still shaking. "But he will come back." "Yes," Michael said, "because he believes you still belong to him." Vanessa closed her eyes, the words hitting her like a cold wave. "But you do not," Michael added gently, "and that is what he cannot accept." The house went silent again, as if absorbing the truth of it. Vanessa stared at the floor, struggling to calm her breath. "What happens now?" she whispered. Michael picked up the security tablet and tapped the screen, switching between camera feeds. "Now," he said, "we prepare. He will escalate before he breaks." His eyes darkened as he studied the monitors. "And men who stand on the edge of losing everything often choose the path that hurts the most." Vanessa swallowed. "Hurts who?" "Anyone who refuses to fall with them," Michael said. He turned toward her, his expression steady and unyielding. "But I will not let him get near you." Vanessa felt the fear inside her shift, not disappearing, but moving aside to make room for something else. Trust. It wasn't blind. It wasn't desperate. It was the steady, growing belief that Michael Grant would not allow her to face this storm alone. She stepped closer to him, grounding herself in the quiet power he carried so naturally. "I believe you," she said. And for the first time since the divorce, she felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was standing her ground. The next day carried a strange electric weight, the kind that presses against the air before something irrevocable happens. Vanessa woke before dawn, unable to lie still beneath the heavy comforter. Sleep had eluded her for hours, broken by half-formed dreams of footsteps crunching through snow, of shadows between the trees, of someone breathing just outside her window. Each time she had forced herself awake, reminding herself that the estate's walls were thick stone, its doors secured with iron locks, its grounds watched by cameras, Michael monitored with the precision of a man protecting more than property. But even stone felt fragile with Eric roaming the edges of her new world. Vanessa slipped out of bed, dressed quickly, and made her way downstairs. The mansion was hushed, but not with peace. Instead, it felt alert, bracing itself like a creature sensing danger long before it arrives. Light from the chandeliers bathed the hall in muted gold as she moved toward the kitchen. Michael was already there. He stood near the stove, a pot warming on the burner, steam curling in the dim light. He wore a dark sweater, sleeves pushed to his elbows, hands braced on the counter as if he had been standing like that for a long time. When he heard her footsteps, he turned slightly, and Vanessa instantly recognized the look on his face. Calm, but not relaxed. Focused. Containing something heavier beneath the surface. She cleared her throat. "Did you sleep?" "A little," he replied. "Enough." She doubted that, but she didn't press. Instead, she moved beside him, busying herself with preparing tea, anything to give her hands a task. "Will he come again today?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Michael said without hesitation, "but not alone this time." Vanessa froze, the spoon clinking against the mug. "You saw something?" Michael stepped aside so she could see the tablet resting on the counter. The cameras displayed replay footage from the early hours before dawn. Figures moving in the distance near Ridgeview Heights, shadows clustering around Eric's driveway, hushed shapes entering cars. The footage wasn't clear enough to identify the men, but their posture was unmistakable. Deliberate, purposeful, gathered around Eric like foot soldiers awaiting orders. "He is organizing something," Michael said. "What, I do not yet know, but desperate men always find companions who believe chaos is a currency." A cold dread crept through Vanessa's ribs. "He cannot force his way in here. He cannot—" "No," Michael interrupted gently. "He cannot force anything that the law and this house do not permit. But he can try to rattle us. He can trespass. He can provoke. And when men like him begin to lose everything they counted on, they often turn to spectacle." Vanessa felt her breath tremble. "A spectacle meant to scare me." Michael nodded once. "Fear is the only language he truly understands." They stood in silence for a moment, the kettle humming in the background. Then Michael added, more softly, "But fear is also predictable, and predictability can be used." She swallowed hard, unsure whether to ask what he meant by that. Instead, she changed the subject. "Have you heard anything from Madison?" Michael let out a slow exhale. "She has left him, packed her things, disappeared. Her car was gone all night." He paused. "Good for her, though her reasons are likely self-serving." Vanessa sat slowly at the table. She was never loyal to him, only to what he provided. Michael gave a subtle nod. "And loyalty built on convenience collapses the moment convenience fades." Vanessa stared at her hands, remembering how Madison had looked across the courtroom window just days earlier. Smug, triumphant, the living symbol of everything Vanessa had been replaced by. Now Madison fled from Eric with the same speed Vanessa once fled from her own disappointment. There was a strange solace in that symmetry, though she was not proud to feel it. Michael poured her tea and set the mug in front of her. "Drink," he said. "You will need clarity today." She did as he instructed, letting the warmth flood her chest. After a long moment, she whispered, "Michael, what if he tries to hurt you?" Michael paused mid-step, turning to face her fully. His gaze held hers with unyielding steadiness. "Then he will discover," Michael said, "that I am not an easy man to harm." There was no arrogance in the statement, no bluster, just a quiet, immovable truth. Vanessa felt the tension in her chest ease just slightly. After breakfast, Michael led her to the study where thick drapes blocked the windows. He closed the doors behind them with deliberate care. "We need to discuss the estate," he said. "There are vulnerabilities I have been meaning to address for years. Your presence has accelerated the timeline." Vanessa blinked in surprise. "My presence?" "Yes," he replied. "You are a reason for him to come here, and therefore, you are also a reason for me to fortify the property." He unrolled a map of the estate across the large wooden desk. The mansion, the grounds, the greenhouse, the winding driveway, the forested border. "The west path," he said, pointing, "is the weakest point. It opens to an old service road that connects to Ridgeview Heights. It is how Eric approached yesterday." "And today?" she asked. "He will try again," Michael said, "but he will find it altered." He tapped the map again. "I adjusted the security system. Floodlights will activate if anyone crosses the line. Cameras will switch to automatic recording. An alert will go to the sheriff's office as well." Vanessa let out a slow breath. "Thank you." He gave a small smile, brief but genuine. "You thanked me yesterday and will thank me tomorrow. Eventually you will realize I am not doing this out of charity." She looked at him closely. "Then why?" "Because this house has needed a purpose for a very long time," he said, "and so have I." A soft knock suddenly echoed through the study door. Both of them froze. A second knock followed, heavier, impatient. Vanessa's breath hitched. Which door was it? The front? The side entrance? The back hallway? Michael moved instantly, silent as a shadow, and crossed to the security tablet he had brought with him. He tapped the screen, switching between camera feeds. Vanessa stepped closer. The front gate camera flickered. Then the image sharpened. A group of men stood at the gate. 3 of them. Eric in the center, his posture rigid, his face pale with rage, and his eyes wild with something far more dangerous than anger: entitlement. The men beside him were muscular, bundled in dark jackets, their expressions hardened into something unmistakable. Michael's jaw tightened. "He brought enforcers," he said quietly. Vanessa felt her blood run cold. "What do they want?" "They want entrance," Michael said. "And when they do not receive it, they will escalate." Eric stepped forward on the screen, gripping the bars, shouting something they could not hear through the feed. Michael turned to Vanessa. "Stay in this room. Do not move. Do not speak. I will handle this." "Michael," she began, but he cut her off with a look, firm, calm, absolute. "I promised you protection," he said, "and I intend to keep it." He left the study before she could reply, closing the door behind him with a soft, controlled click. Vanessa pressed a trembling hand to her chest. Outside, on the other side of the iron gates, the storm had arrived, and now it demanded to be answered. The moment Michael left the study, Vanessa felt the house shift again, not physically, but atmospherically, as if the walls themselves sensed a confrontation rising at the gates. She stood frozen beside the map of the estate, staring at the security tablet's flickering image of Eric and his hired men gripping the wrought iron bars. Their figures were stark against the snow, rigid silhouettes cut from fury and intent. Vanessa's pulse hammered in her throat, and her breath came in shallow, uneven pulls. She wanted to run after Michael, to beg him not to face Eric alone, but fear anchored her feet. And beneath that fear, something else churned. Guilt, tangled with the remnants of old habits, the instinct to calm Eric's temper before it swallowed everything around him. No. She closed her eyes and forced the thought away. She was not his shield anymore. Shouts erupted outside, muffled but unmistakable. Vanessa jolted and turned back to the security feed. Eric had stepped closer to the gate, thrusting his face between the bars while one of his companions pounded a fist against the metal. The second man stood behind them, gaze sweeping the estate like a predator searching for weak points. Snow fell around them in steady flakes, turning the scene almost surreal, as if violence had found its way into a snow globe. Then Michael appeared on the screen. He stepped outside with the slow, deliberate calm of a man who understood the language of threats but did not speak it. Vanessa held her breath as he walked down the front steps, snow crunching beneath his boots, hands clasped loosely behind his back. He stopped several paces from the gate, far enough to deny physical contact, but close enough to command the space. Eric erupted immediately. Through the feed, Vanessa could not hear the exact words, but his body language was unmistakable. Arms flailing, face contorted, the wild swing of emotions that always preceded his worst decisions. Michael stood unmoving, his posture a stark contrast to the chaos thrashing against the gate. One of the hired men pressed forward, shouting something at Michael. The other kept scanning the estate, as if searching for another entrance. Vanessa's stomach lurched. They think they can get in. They think they can force their way to her. She gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles whitening. Outside, Michael finally spoke. His expression remained composed, but the way he lifted his chin told her everything. He was warning them. A line was being drawn. Vanessa leaned toward the tablet, straining to read the shape of his lips, to imagine the firmness in his voice. Eric slammed his palms against the bars, screaming something that made one of his men flinch. He pointed toward the mansion, toward the window, toward her. Even without sound, Vanessa knew exactly what he was shouting. "Bring her out!" The hired men stepped forward as if to underscore the demand. Vanessa felt something cold settle inside her. The realization that Eric no longer saw her as a person, but as an object, a possession he had lost and intended to reclaim by force. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. On screen, Michael moved closer to the gate, only by a step, but enough to shift the balance of power. He spoke again. Eric barked something back, his voice raw, his hair whipping in the wind. Then Michael reached into his coat. Vanessa gasped, but it was not a weapon he pulled out. It was a folded document. He held it up for Eric to see. Through the camera's grainy lens, she recognized the bold county seal. Foreclosure. Full transfer of title. Proof of ownership. Eric recoiled as if physically struck. He shouted, gestured, denied, pleaded, accused, all within the span of seconds. His men exchanged confused glances. One step back, uncertainty breaking through the aggression in his stance. Michael unfolded the document slowly, deliberately, showing each page through the gate, turning it just enough for the wind to catch the edges. He was not taunting Eric. He was confronting him with undeniable truth. Vanessa felt her breath catch. Michael was forcing the moment Eric had desperately tried to outrun. The moment when the illusion collapsed completely. Eric lunged forward, grabbing the bars with white-knuckled desperation. He shook them violently, screaming something that made the hired men hover in tense limbo, unsure if they should pull him back or join him. Then one of them stepped away and began pacing along the fence line, testing its strength with heavy tugs. Vanessa's fear spiked. They were looking for weakness, looking for a way in, looking for her. Michael turned his head slightly, eyes following the man's movements. He said something with sharp brevity, and the pacing man froze, startled. Michael pointed, not at Vanessa's window, not at the house, but at the high posts of the gate, at the small metal box mounted discreetly near the hinges, a security sensor, floodlights, sheriff's auto alert. Vanessa saw the realization flicker across the man's face. He stepped back quickly. The second man cursed under his breath. Michael returned his gaze to Eric. Eric sagged forward, chest heaving, shoulders trembling with a mixture of rage and defeat. He pointed at the house again, spitting out a stream of furious words. He jabbed his finger toward the gate, toward Michael, toward the sky itself, as if the universe had betrayed him. Then suddenly, he fell silent, completely still. He stared at Michael through the bars, his expression shifting into something slower and darker. The look of a man calculating rather than raging, a man choosing spite over surrender. Then he whispered something. Even without sound, Vanessa knew what it was. "You will regret this." Michael did not flinch. He folded the document, tucked it back into his coat, and turned away. He walked back toward the house with the same steady steps, leaving Eric screaming at his diminishing silhouette. Eric's voice rose, frantic and shrill, until one of the hired men grabbed his shoulder, urging him toward the car. Eric jerked away, shouting something venomous, but the men did not retreat with him. They exchanged glances, hesitant, wary, and without warning they climbed into their own vehicle and drove away, abandoning him. Eric remained at the gate alone, a solitary figure thrashing against a world that no longer obeyed him. Finally, he staggered back to his Escalade, ripped open the door, and slammed it shut hard enough to shake the frame. The tires spun through slush as he sped away, leaving only a trail of churned snow behind him. Inside the study, Vanessa sagged into the nearest chair, unable to stop shaking. The storm at the gate had ended, but the chaos inside her had not. Moments later, Michael returned. His coat was dusted with snow, his face calm but tired. He closed the door gently behind him. "It is done," he said. Vanessa looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "For now." Michael nodded once. "For now." She swallowed hard. He looked unhinged. "He is," Michael replied, "and men who lose everything do not go quietly." Vanessa stared at the map spread across the desk, her hands trembling on her lap. "What happens next?" she asked. Michael stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Next," he said, "we prepare for the final break." And Vanessa knew. The storm had not passed. It was gathering strength. The storm broke the following evening, not with snow or thunder, but with the kind of silence that precedes catastrophe. The Grant estate felt unnaturally still, as if bracing itself. Vanessa sensed it the moment she woke from an uneasy nap on the study's couch, the security tablet glowing beside her. Daylight had drained from the sky, leaving only blue dusk and long shadows crawling across the grounds. She pushed herself upright, heart already tapping out a warning rhythm. She found Michael in the front hall, fastening the lock on the main door despite it already being secured. His expression was focused, carved from stone. "He is coming," Michael said quietly before she could speak. "I saw him drive past twice. He is circling." Vanessa felt temperature and sound collapse around her. "Alone?" "No," Michael said, "but the others will not interfere. Not now." He paused, then added with solemn certainty, "This time he came for himself." They moved to the study where the cameras gave a clear view of the estate's perimeter. Darkness had settled heavily, broken only by the lamps and the pale smudge of moon on snow. The monitors showed empty roads, empty paths, empty fields, until suddenly one of the feeds flickered. A figure stepped out from the tree line behind the west wing. Eric. He moved slowly, deliberately, no longer frantic but eerily calm. He walked with the unsteady rhythm of a man whose mind had decided something irreversible. Vanessa gripped the back of the chair so tightly her fingers ached. "He is inside the protected zone again. Michael, I know." Michael's voice was steady, but his jaw clenched. They watched Eric advance across the snow, one staggered step after another, his coat unbuttoned, hair wild, breath visible in ragged clouds. He held nothing in his hands, no weapon, no bag, only his fury, only the last remnants of a collapsing life. He approached the glass wall of the greenhouse, its old frame outlined like the skeleton of a forgotten cathedral. He paused there, staring up at the mansion as though he were seeing it for the first time, as though every brick had betrayed him. Then he moved again, toward the side path that led directly to the house. Vanessa's breath hitched. "He is coming to the door." Michael turned to her. "Go upstairs. Now." She shook her head. "I cannot leave you alone with him." "You must," he said, stepping closer. "If he sees you, he will not listen. He will not stop. You are the fuel to his madness. I am the barrier." Tears prickled behind her eyes, but she nodded. She trusted him. That truth anchored her more firmly than fear ever could. She took several steps toward the staircase before glancing back one last time. Michael stood in the foyer, tall, steady, resolute, a man ready to face a shattered storm head on. She slipped up the stairs and into the darkened hallway above, crouching near the railing to watch unseen. A sharp knock echoed through the entire house. It was not loud. It was not violent. It was worse, restrained, deliberate, almost civilized. Michael approached the door but did not open it. "This property is private," he called through the wood. "Leave now." Eric's voice came through muffled but chillingly clear. "Open the door, Michael. We need to talk." "There is nothing to discuss," Michael replied. "Then she will come out," Eric said. "She always does." Vanessa pressed a hand to her mouth, shaking. Michael answered with a tone cold enough to freeze air. She is not coming. Ever again. Silence. Then Eric laughed, a hollow, broken sound. You think you can steal my life? He spat. You think you can hide her? You old fraud? You think she cares about you? She is using you, you idiot. Michael remained calm. Leave before the sheriff arrives. I am not leaving, Eric hissed. Not without what is mine. Michael stepped closer to the door. She is not an object. She is my wife. No, Michael said. She is free. The words ignited Eric. He lunged at the door, slamming his fists against it, shouting a stream of accusations so vile and chaotic that Vanessa felt each one like a blade despite not being the target. Michael did not react. He stood firm, letting Eric's rage burn itself against unyielding stone. Then suddenly the pounding stopped. Eric spoke in a whisper. Open the door or you will regret this, Michael answered, equally quiet. Do your worst. A heartbeat passed. Another. Vanessa leaned forward, straining to hear. Then Eric screamed, a raw, feral sound, and something crashed against the door. Wood splintered. Vanessa jerked backward, heart slamming against her ribs. Eric was trying to break in. She heard him throw himself against the door again and again, each impact rattling the frame. Michael reached for the small drawer hidden in the foyer table and pressed a button. A deep metallic click echoed through the house as the reinforced lock engaged, a feature from the estate's earliest construction, designed to withstand more than an angry man. Eric roared in frustration, kicking and striking the door until he was breathless. Then he staggered back, panting loudly enough to be heard through the thick wood. "Vanessa!" he shouted. "Come out here! You owe me! You owe me everything!" Vanessa buried her face in her hands, tears spilling silently. Michael stepped closer to the door. You lost her the day you chose power over kindness, the day you chose humiliation over love. This house is proof of your failure, Eric, not mine. For several seconds there was no sound at all. Then the security lights outside activated, flooding the yard with harsh white beams. A loud automated warning blared across the grounds. Someone had triggered the high-alert perimeter. Moments later, the distant wail of a sheriff's siren cut through the night. Eric froze. In that suspended moment, Vanessa watched through the window as he looked left, then right, breathing hard, his silhouette caught in the unforgiving light. He stared up at the mansion, eyes wild and empty, then pointed toward the window where she hid. A silent accusation, a twisted farewell. Then he turned and ran. He sprinted across the snow, slipping, stumbling, nearly falling, until he reached his Escalade. He climbed in, slammed the door, and sped off into the dark just as the sheriff's cruiser pulled into Ridgeview Heights. Vanessa collapsed against the railing, trembling uncontrollably. Below, Michael locked the door once more and leaned his forehead briefly against the wood. When he finally looked up, his expression was not triumphant. It was tired, deeply, profoundly tired. Vanessa descended the stairs slowly. When she reached the bottom, Michael met her halfway. "It is over," he said softly. Her voice shook. "For good?" Michael hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, he cannot return now. The law will see to that." Vanessa exhaled sharply, her breath breaking. For the first time in a long time, she felt something loosen inside her. A knot that had been wound so tightly for so many years, she had forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. Michael took her trembling hand in his steady one. "You are safe," he said simply. Vanessa looked up at him, tears glistening on her lashes. "Because of you." Michael shook his head. "Because you chose to leave the life that broke you. I merely opened a door." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "Then I am grateful for the door." And in the quiet that followed, the sirens fading, the snow falling again, the house settling from battle back into sanctuary, something new began to take shape. Not just safety, not just freedom, a future. It was the act of a strong woman. But on the other hand, that single dollar left on the nightstand and those freezing words, "You mean nothing to me." Was it too cruel? Or did Yuri earn this fate through arrogance, by throwing his own wife into the cold and stealing from his own mother? Tell me in the comments what you think. Do you condemn Valentina or do you support her? What would you have done in her place? Your opinion truly matters to me. And would you like to hear what happened next? how Valentina's and Michael's life unfolded in their new home, whether Valentina found new love, and whether Milana learned her lesson working the checkout line. If you want the continuation of this story, make sure to tell me. And if this episode touched you, please support the channel. Hit like and subscribe. It really helps. At the end of this video, a box will appear in the middle of your screen. Click it to watch more of our most powerful stories. Wishing you all the best.